Welcome to Podcasts Like It's the 2000s, the podcast where we talk about the films of the aughts here from our perch in 2024. I am one of your hosts, Phyllis Gove.
I am your other host, Emily St. James. And a fun fact about me is every time I take a step, doves fly
It's
out
beautiful. It's
of
a
the
beautiful
way.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It gets annoying
It's
sometimes. There's so much bird crap on everything I own,
it's true.
but it
But
looks awesome.
it looks beautiful. With us today to start a brand new miniseries on the Tom Cruise films of the 2000s is writer, sorry, my God, I screwed this up, is entertainment journalist, Jamie Jirak.
I'm right in that job.
You too.
Hello.
You right.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Words.
Yeah.
To talk Mission Impossible 2 with us, the first film of Tom Cruise's run in the 2000s, which is Emily's showing her box, her Mission Impossible box set.
I tried to watch this on Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray's so old that my 4K player wouldn't play it. It was like, no,
really?
Yeah, like I put in Fallout just to make sure, and yeah, Fallout played perfectly, but yeah, it just was like, I'm not going to do this. Sorry.
It's also possible that your 4K player has better taste than
listen,
you. Perhaps
I needed to. You know what? It needs to know that I have a job to do.
It's true. So this is the first of this very interesting journey that Tom Cruise goes through throughout the 2000s, which we will be buckling up for. But Jamie, I reached out to you because I'm a fan of your various iterations, social media and the like. And you picked Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, I did.
So what's your history with Mission Impossible 2? Do you remember seeing it for the first time? Do you remember your excitement for it? I'm assuming. How did that go?
So I was obsessed with the first one as a kid. The second one came out, I was pretty young, I was 10, but I was still like, let's go. And I did not really care for it in theaters. My appreciation for John Woo didn't super exist yet. I didn't make the Birds connection, even though I'd probably seen Face Off 100 times by the time I was 10. And the thing is, over the years, I am a huge just Mission Impossible fan in general. I made this Elsa Faust sweater myself. I've got a Rogue Nation tattoo. I'm just like, really love this franchise. I think that 2 is the worst, but my go-to line is worst doesn't mean bad. And that's my official stance on Mission Impossible 2. I've grown to like it over the years, but it's definitely my least favorite. But I just want to talk about any Mission Impossible anytime. So I just jumped on that.
Yeah. Yes, please, Emily.
It's I feel that way about it too. I've probably watched it four or five times now, and every time I like it more. I am fully now like, you know what? I think this movie's deeply flawed but good. Like I think that's where I am on it, you know?
Emily and I were texting about this. You watched it before I did, or rewatched it before I did.
I did because I was busy last night. So I was like, I gotta watch this.
Listen,
I have friends. I have friends now.
You got friends, you got a baby, you got shit to do. So I had not seen this film in a beat. And I went into it as open-minded as I could because Emily made some very valid arguments for this film. Its operatic nature, it's kind of, the John Woo of it all, right? I was surprised by how little action this movie has in it.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, I was like, it's been like 40 minutes since anyone's done anything of interest. Which was sort of surprising to me because it's kind of got in the oeuvre of this franchise, I'd say it has the legacy of being like the most like alpha male kind of aggro of the movies. I think the Limp Bizkit, the like slow-mo, the long hair, the wraparound glasses, like all that sort of stuff. And yet it's sort of oddly the most kind of introspective at times too. Like it kind of like sits in its moments. I was surprised by that. I thought it would be more actiony, and it kind of is just sort of bookended by action.
Our former guest, once past and future guest, Mitchell Beaupre, they said on Letterboxd, their review is like, this is the most openly romantic blockbuster ever. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's extreme in all construction. It is meaning to be a sweeping, swooning, romantic thing. And I don't even just mean that in the sense of like these two have a relationship that develops. I mean it in the sense of like everything is over the top in the style of like romantic musicians, artists, poets. You know, it's like everything is just so emotional and over the top.
Jamie, would you say of the relationships that Ethan has in this franchise, I think that most people say like the Ilsa relationship is probably the one that feels the most potent. But even then, like that relationship isn't really consummated. Like,
you don't try to tell me that.
But maybe that's kind of why people like it so much too, right? Like I don't Michelle, nothing against Michelle Moynihan, but like I do think that the weakness of 3 to some degree was the going all in on a relationship in the way that they did. This one is the most Bondy. Like this is the most like Ethan meets a chick, she's real hot, sparks fly, quote unquote sparks fly, and thus he's invested in her. Would you agree?
I had that thought rewatching it. I rewatch this movie a lot because I rewatch these movies a lot. So I think I most recently watched it like a year ago. But I had that thought this time, the same thing where this is the Bondiest because I have recently gone through all of Bond and I had that exact thought, and it does feel like. There's no part of you. This movie ends and you think you're going to see her again in 3, like right, like I just don't think that's. But I just love her though. I think she's so like first of all she's so beautiful, and God, I interviewed her once and she's a little kooky in like a very positive way. Like I just love her presence in general, I the whole romantic just overall thing. I get what this person whose name I forget you said is.
Yes, Mitchell. Yeah,
Mitchell. But it's I enjoy it, but it's also kind of messed up, right? The fact that he's like they hook up and then he's like, no, go back to your ex, who's a murderer and a crazy man.
Yeah.
We've all done it.
We've all done it. We've all been there. Yeah, for sure. I do think that's
why my marriage still exists. Then thank God.
I think that and it's forgive me, it's Tandui now, correct? Am I saying Tandui, that correctly? Yeah. Tandui, okay. I think that like she had a really, I don't want to say that's over, but she's had a fascinating career, right? Like I do think that this falls in a time where Hollywood was sort of like, is she a movie star? Can we make her into a movie star? I heard sort of conflicting reports about the whole Charlie's Angels thing, which is that she was supposed to, and then this movie, which notoriously ran over and screwed over several careers, which we'll talk about, hindered her being in it. But then I also remember hearing an interview with her talking about how her and Amy Pascal didn't totally see eye to eye on Charlie's Angels, and that maybe that was part of the reason why she stepped away from it as well. I think she would have been great. She was going to be the Lucy Liu character in Charlie's Angels. I think to your point, Jamie, she's so watchable. She feels much more complex and interesting than the roles she's sometimes in, this being a prime example of that. But yeah, I mean, she's great. I don't know that her and Tom have a ton of chemistry. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I don't know that they have chemistry, but what I have come to believe is that they don't need to have it for the movie to work. Like it's
sure.
It is a romance in the Hitchcockian sense where the experience of it is more important than the emotion of it. You know, like I don't know. So I rewatched this last year for the first time in a long time because I watched all of them in the build up to Dead Reckoning. And I kind of logged it on Letterboxd with a fairly dismissive thing because I was like, here's all the problems with it. But then when I watched the other movies, most of which I prefer to this one, there's one I don't like as much. I was like, these all feel like part of the same franchise in a way that's great. And what I came to appreciate is that 2 feels like nothing else in the franchise. It's so unique. It's so itself. It is so full of visual flair. And I will always go for a thing that feels fresh over, you know, even if it's like even if it's exploring a dead end, you know, over a thing that is like, yeah. So that's what I appreciate about this. It feels like no other Mission Impossible movie in a way.
It is committed to a thing in a way that I would argue visually and stylistically kind of outside of De Palma's. I would argue that moving forward, as great as those films are, I don't know that there's like a director's stamp on them per se, like visually. You know what I mean? Like they feel of a piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's very much like Abrams directs his in a way that is emphasizing that it's almost a TV pilot, which is fine. Like that's what the franchise needs to move forward. Brad Bird is very into the spectacle and then the conversation scenes. He's kind of like, here's a shot, reverse shot. McQuarrie is famously like, McQuarrie's very much an auteur, but he's famously like, we're gonna fucking make this up on the fly and then in post, and we're gonna like, and it's wonderful. I love his approach, but this movie, every single shot is like, it's only could come from this movie, and I love that.
Yes.
I do
think,
like the way that the way this franchise for the first 5 movies did have a different director each time, because you do get that. And like you like say about Abrams, like Abrams I don't think really has much of a visual style, but still. Abrams but Abrams is such a good producer that it's like we have Simon Pegg now because of him. And so I can and you know, and I don't love 3, but it has the best villain of the franchise. I don't think we can argue that. And but then again, McQuarrie if he had left, we wouldn't have Fallout, and Fallout's one of my favorite movies of all time. So, but going back to John Woo, it is like no one's John Woo. They're like literally, no one comes close to doing what John Woo does, and that's why we all make bird jokes, because I don't get it. Why does he love him? But my God, I'm happy to see him.
Yeah, they look good in slow-mo. It is interesting how. And forgive me if I'm saying, if this is a dumb thing to say, but like, has John Woo ever done like a full-on romance? Has he ever like just not done action and just done a sweeping romance?
With the caveat that I have not seen a lot of his films since this movie. Yeah. You know, I'll take a look. It doesn't.
I don't think so.
To my memory.
Yeah. I've been trying to watch more of his like Hong Kong stuff, and I can't say I've seen it all, but I've not seen anything that falls under that category.
Yeah, it is just very interesting to me that, like, you know, we're going to talk, or we have talked at this point. Forgive me, we're doing this out of order, but we have talked Crouching Tiger at this point, I believe, and in a previous miniseries, and I do feel like, you know, not to conflate, you know, Asian filmmakers here, but it is sort of interesting that like Ang Lee found a way to sort of marry the romance and the action in a way that sort of elevated the genre, if you will. There's
there's certainly romance in Woo's films. You know, like when we watched Hard Boiled for 92, there's romance in that, but it is very much of a piece with what typically action movie romance is, which is like, you know, kind of the side flavor that like keeps certain scenes interesting, adds some dramatic stakes, etc. It is, you know, although I think I would argue that there are few films ever that weds the action and the romance as well as Crouching Tiger. So.
Totally fair. I'm going to give a little synopsis and a little context for the people that maybe have not seen Mission Impossible 2. Tom Cruise returns to his role as Ethan Hunt in the second installment of Mission Impossible. This time, Ethan Hunt leads his IMF team in quotation marks, this is not a team movie, on a mission to capture a deadly German virus before it's released by terrorists. His mission is made impossible due to the fact that he is not the only person after samples of the disease he must contest with a gang of international terrorists headed by a turned bad IMF agent who has already managed to steal the cure. Mission Impossible opened on May 24th, 2000 against Dinosaur, Gladiator, Road Trip, U571, and Frequency. It would go on to make $546 million on a $125 million budget. It is 56% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 42% from audiences. It won 2 MTV Movie Awards. Best Male Performance by Tom Cruise and Best Action Sequence. However, it was also nominated for 2 Golden Raspberry Awards at the 2000 ceremony, Worst Remake or Sequel and Worst Supporting Actress, which is gross and awful, as well as nominated for a Stinker Award for Worst Song. Limp Bizkit's Take a Look Around.
Listen, anytime you're nominated for a Razzie, I'm immediately on your side.
Absolutely.
Like, even if I don't like the movie, I'm like, that shouldn't have happened.
The Razzies are a terrible organization and they should be eradicated. So I agree with you 100%, Emily.
I continued digging into John Woo. He did make he made an epic war film, you have to imagine, called Red Cliff, which got very good reviews in the US when it was released, but they took a 2-film thing and edited it down. to one. You have to imagine there's some, but he made an explicitly romantic drama called The Crossing, which was released in 2 parts. So far as I can tell, it's never received a US release. And the Wikipedia thing for like critical reception, it's not existent. It was very successful in China, but it's Zhang Ziyi, and it's about a romance that plays out across the sort of the World War II, basically.
I think that this movie, and again, I know you were 10, Jamie, when this came out, so perhaps you weren't as on the pulse, but it feels like, Tom Cruise makes the first one in 96. 96 being Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire, right? Like, he's arguably the biggest movie star in the world, right? He then decides, I'm going to go to London and make Eyes Wide Shut forever. Because, how many opportunities do you get to work with Stanley Kubrick? He makes that film, and he makes Magnolia, and essentially kind of hits pause on the quote unquote movie star Tom Cruise, right? I would argue, kind of chases Oscar for a little bit in those 2 films. It feels as though he's certainly sort of trying to get his credibility. And then this is the first movie that feels like he's trying to get it back, right? Like, I'm back. I'm movie star Tom Cruise. I'm hanging off of cliffs. I've got long hair. Aren't I hot? Like, just real action star, movie star Tom Cruise. And thus this film had this like real hype machine behind it in a way that, I mean, I guess we still sort of have it today, but not in the same way in terms of a movie star. Like, this was a juggernaut movie. And I think the expectations were incredibly high on it. I mean, Emily, when obviously you're closer to my age, were you hyped for this movie?
I wasn't hyped for it. I was never like super into the first one. I liked it. I didn't I came to appreciate that movie more later. But it came out when I was a teenager, and I saw it, and I was like, yeah, that was fun. I was much more into Independence Day at the time.
Sure.
But I went and saw this basically to get away from a family gathering I didn't want to be at, and I liked it just fine. But like, if I would guessing 2 days later, I could not have told you anything about it. It's another, again, these early Mission Impossibles the first 2 especially, I've come to appreciate more with time as I've like rewatched them. And I think they are movies made for adults in a way that is like perhaps not what you'd expect. And I think that's true of the whole franchise. Like, a kid can watch them and have a great time. But like, I think a lot of them, I think a lot of the nuances of the story and the relationships and the like, especially the like team that builds across the later films, is like more approachable if you've been in, situations approximating those. So
it just feels like
I work with Luther. I work with Luther from Mission Impossible. It's wonderful. He's a great coworker.
How come that wasn't your fun fact?
Well, I mean, I didn't want to brag.
I want to blow up his spot. Sure. Yeah. I feel like the ding against the first one was it's too complicated. And now I'm like, guys, this movie's really not that complicated.
Especially for De Palma.
That too. Sure. 100%.
I mean,
yeah. But like, people were like, this movie's a head scratcher. I don't understand what's going on in it. So then this movie has like basically nothing, right? This movie's like virus, must stop virus, love pretty girl. Like, it's really, really simple. And I would argue maybe too simple for its own good at times. Like, you do wish that there was like a little bit more complexity going on. But
I don't know that I do. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Like, not in the sense that like I think it would be hurt by having like slightly more twists and turns. It is part of the genre they're in. But I do think the kind of story it wants to tell, which is again this sweeping romance against this spy backdrop. Yeah, I think that necessarily needs a little less complication. Now, again, I think there are ways in which this film falls short of what it's trying to do, but like, I think that it is an overcorrection to the reception of the first one. But also, when you think about the other 2 big movies that year were Twister and Independence Day, you're like, yeah, Mission Impossible is quite a bit more complex.
It's much more complicated than those 2 movies. I mean, this movie always, from the research I did, was always John Woo's. Like, it never felt like there were really, the only other person that insanely was in contention was Oliver Stone. I don't know what Oliver Stone's version of Mission Impossible is, but it ain't not complicated.
After Macquarie's done with Dead Reckoning, Oliver Stone should be
Give it back. Yeah, he should wrap up the franchise. I mean, I understand it purely on a. So, rumor has it De Palma's offered this movie and turns it down because him and Tom Cruise did not get along, and I'm assuming that Tom Cruise offered it to him just out of sort of, I don't know, some sort of allegiance, whatever the case might be. De Palma turns it down to make, I think, Mission to Mars, everyone's favorite film about going to Mars, a movie that doesn't exist. And then I guess Tom Cruise goes to Oliver Stone in the hopes that like he wanted each of these installments to feel different, right? Like he wanted it to be like kind of like Alien, it seems, right? Which is, how do we give it to a new visionary person? So he goes to the guy that gets him an Oscar nomination for Born on the 4th of July and is like, hey, do you want to make a Mission Impossible movie? He's briefly attached to it and then he falls off of it. And then
he should have gone to a different guy who got him an Oscar. Not Cameron Crowe should have made Mission Impossible 2.
Oh, don't you worry, Emily. Next week we talk Vanilla Sky.
I thought you were going to say Paul Thomas Anderson.
Also,
like, that'd be weird.
This is like the thing where like he's like that comes out like 6 months before this, so he doesn't yet know he's going to get an Oscar. So it's like true. I'm weirdly following the logic of this, but yes, he should have asked Paul Thomas Anderson.
I mean, it is interesting because he goes through a similar, and by he I mean Tom Cruise produced these films with Paula Wagner, so like obviously he was very involved in who the director was. Mission Impossible 3 had a similar situation, right? It was like Joe Carnahan. We're going to talk about this on our Mission Impossible 3 episode, but Joe Carnahan, David Fincher went through a bunch of like, aggressively visionary guys to some degree or another before landing on JJ. But John Woo, it's not that John Woo doesn't make sense. Face Off fucking rules. If I saw Face Off in 97 and I'm Tom Cruise and I'm like trying to figure out who the next guy, I would absolutely give it to that guy. I just think Face Off's a better movie.
Well, Face Off's a better movie than most movies, to be fair.
Yeah. Fair enough. But like Face Off just fucking rules, and it's so gonzo, and this movie needed more gonzo, in my opinion. I don't hate this movie. It is my least favorite of the franchise, but I don't hate this movie. I don't hate any of them. It feels so. There's apparently a 3.5 hour cut of this movie that John Woo presented to.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen. It could be The Brutalist, but for Mission Impossible 2.
I mean, release the Woo cut, in my opinion, right? Like, give us the 3.5 hour version of this movie. I don't know what it is. Jamie's face, obviously reticent and understandably so. I don't know that I need it, but I'm also just like, what is that movie?
The flaws of this film almost entirely exist from like, you don't entirely understand why anyone's doing anything. And that's exactly the sort of thing that would be fixed by a longer cut. Does it need to be 3.5 hours? No. But another 20 to 30 minutes, I think couldn't hurt.
So I find it ironic that there were 4 writers involved in this, or 4 credited writers to some degree. William Goldman writes the first script. Amazing. Goes,
Heroes.
We're just going to go to the greatest screenwriter, one of the greatest screenwriters ever, right? He writes it.
Just keep doing it.
He goes, and apparently Goldman said he was the first writer on the film. All that's left of mine is the climax and the climbing on the rocks sequence, which I think is amazing that he's just upfront about it. I couldn't come up with a good villain, and Bob Towne did. Sure. So Robert Towne then comes onto this film. He says that several action sequences which is the case. The action sequences were planned, so you had to kind of write around these action sequences, which is common now, unfortunately. Maybe less common back then. And then 2 writers are brought in, 2 TV writers, 2 Star Trek writers, Ron Moore and Brandon Braga are brought in. So they have story by credit. Robert Towne has screenplay credit. These are all really talented writers, and yet it feels like it's been stripped down to it's just like to the studs, basically.
Yeah, I think that that's why I think a longer cut would help this movie. I do think maybe. I think like Robert Towne, not known for writing like sort of stories that are simple in their motivations. It does feel like there's a thing missing here.
Yes.
And I think
I mean, yes. So I just want to briefly say that when I saw this film in 2000, I saw it, I don't probably opening week, what have you.
You loved it.
I was very excited. I loved the first one. Like I was a big fan of the first one. And I remember seeing this film with two of my friends. And before going to see it, I went into the bathroom, and in the stall, someone had etched into the wall of the stall, Mission Impossible 2 is the greatest action movie of all time.
Good for them.
So your hype level raised way up.
Way up, right? So
had you read the reviews at that point? Because they were like middling.
Probably not, Emily. I was probably not. I mean, definitely not. So I'm like, well, Jesus Christ. I've seen Face Off. This is going to be the greatest action movie of all time. Thus, the man who scrawled this into the wall of this bathroom stall. So the expectations on this thing were just far too high, which isn't the movie's fault, to be clear. But even to this day, I'm still that kid every time I press play on this thing being like, I really want it to be great this time. And it just kind of never is great.
Yeah.
I want to know where that Vandal is now. Like,
yes, right?
Who walked out of that movie so hyped that he had to like spread some graffiti on the old AMC wall.
So fucking hyped. I mean, probably, I don't know. It's Chris McQuarrie. It's the only what would only make sense.
When I got done with this film, I went into the bathroom at the Lorraine. What is it called? It's the Mitchell Theater, the Starlight Theater now. I don't remember what it was called then. In Mitchell, South Dakota, and I scrawled into the bathroom stall. Mission Impossible 2 is a complicated, flawed movie, but it has its pleasures if you'll give yourself over to them. Especially pay attention to the operatic, romantic tone. And then I got arrested and went to jail.
But you started Letterboxd, so it worked out.
I mean, yeah. And Mitchell saw that.
Mitchell saw that and was like, "Yeah, it's true." I do feel like this movie wasn't hated when it came out, but it did feel like a step down. I think that everyone was just sort of like, "What is this?" At the same time,
it also got written about as being too complicated. Like the reviews were very much like, and then people keep switching faces. Like people were so fucking thrown by all and the plot devices in these movies are all out of the TV show. And like the TV show was a huge hit. People knew that, but like movie critics were like, I cannot follow any of this. It's so confusing. And I'm like, what?
It's not that confusing.
That's like the people who couldn't follow Greta's Little Women. Like that's what that sounds like to me. Like, what? Why are you watching movies? Or like,
I was so frustrated.
But I mean,
I was so frustrated with the fact that in one timeline they were little women, and in the other they were kind of adults. And I was like,
it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, it is interesting how Ebert in his review, he gives this film 3 stars. And Ebert says, if James Bond is still around at the end of the 21st century, he will look a lot like Ethan Hunt. The hero of Mission Impossible series is a 007 for a time. He's not totally wrong, right? Like, I do think that a mixture of Ethan Hunt and Bourne is what kind of gets us the Daniel Craig Bond movies to some degree, right? Like a little bit more of that rough and tumble kind of grittiness. But this movie really, as Bondy as it is aesthetically, like there's a lot of fire and slow-mo and birds, and like the romanticism and operatic component is not Bond. Like the John Woo component isn't Bond, but on paper it's kind of a Bond movie.
Yeah, I could see, and I think like there is the Brosnan Bonds, which are going on at this time, are very over the top, and this is sort of an attempt to do that within a franchise that's very different. I think. I don't know.
I mean, my favorite moment of this movie, my favorite sequence of this movie, is the car chase between Ethan and Naya. And they're spinning around, and they're in slow-mo, and they've got dust in their hair, and she's about to fly off the side of the cliff, and like it's just that to me is like, I wish the movie was more of this in a weird way. Like it doesn't, it commits to it and fits and starts, but that scene and that sequence to me, on top of being just like some of the best car choreography you're ever going to see. Like, I don't know how they were able to actually get those cars to spin in the way that they do. And I mean, it's pretty magnificent. I don't know. That's a standout for me.
Don't lie. Don't lie. Your favorite moment is the Limp Bizkit song.
Nope.
You texted me,
not.
fuck
Nope.
yeah, Limp Bizkit. Forgot they were there.
Fuck
Yeah. That was great. And I was like, Phil, how could you forget Limp Bizkit? One of the best songs ever written.
God. I mean, oh my God, I can't even with that. It's actually kind of the only time this franchise does commit to a band doing a song. Am I crazy in that, Jamie? I mean, you know the franchise probably.
Yeah, I do. I'm bad at music though. Like, I am. Like, I watched this movie so many times, including yesterday, and I'm like, I couldn't even sing a bar. Like,
No,
like, you know what I mean? Like,
having a band.
I don't think so.
Song.
I don't think that they do.
They do have bands reappropriate the Mission
theme.
Impossible theme across the first three, right? Because like,
yeah, but like,
there's
what
you
is
two. Some of the U2 guys do for the first one.
The drummer and the bassist do the first one, and then Kanye does something with the third movie.
I mean, yeah.
Everyone remembers Kanye's remix of the Mission Impossible theme, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I only speak. The reason that it's interesting is that this movie, and again, this is more of a staple of the time, right? Where you were trying to sell soundtracks. You have Limp Bizkit and Metallica on the soundtrack. So it's just, they never do that again in this franchise, which I just think is interesting, right? That they're just like, this isn't worth their time.
They should have just made it. I did it all for the Naya. Like that would have fit perfectly. Would have been.
That's the worst thing you've ever said. I will just quote Hans Zimmer, who says, I love the theme for Mission Impossible 2 was written in about 6 weeks before they started shooting. I was on it early. Then we had a big meeting in Australia. They loved the love theme. And I said, I know what the story's about. And I always thought about how it was about two men being in love with a girl. So I said to the record company, look, here's one thing I would love to do. Find me bands with female singers, and I'll make all these songs about sirens. And of course, what they did was give me a bunch of heavy metal bands by guys. I promise you it would have been a better movie had it had a better score. I think that he just was like, I guess I got to do fucking guitars through this whole thing.
You know what? He's just a little too early for Evanescence, and that's the fucking vibe you want for this movie.
That's true, though. Evanescence should 100%.
Bring me to life, Ethan Hunt.
Yeah. Jamie, what are your thoughts on the score of this movie? On the sort of the aggro sort of, what was it called? What was that music called? God,
new metal?
Yes, new metal. Yeah. That's what I was looking for.
But it's an NU with an umlaut.
NU with an umlaut, of course. Yes, sir.
I always like revisiting like 2000s soundtracks and stuff like that, just because it does remind me of being a kid and a teenager in such a way that like there's a nostalgia. Like I couldn't tell you what, but I watched something from like 2001 recently that I'd never even seen, but I still I felt nostalgic for it because of the music. And there's like everything's like a little blue in tone in a way, but I also barely pay attention, honestly. Like if it's not the Mission Impossible theme, it's like going right out of my
I mean, that's fair. I don't know that like the scores of this franchise speak to me particularly. I don't know, Emily. Do they like, I mean, they're not like really memorable scores.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the thing I remember from them is the Mission Impossible theme, which famously was written for the television show. But like, yeah, I don't know that, like, and I'm like someone who doesn't, you know, I think people are like very much, we need a great theme, and I'm always like, sure, I mean, it helps, but like I don't like remember movie themes until I'm hearing them. But like we talked about this in our Spider-Man episodes, where I could not hum the Spider-Man theme for you right now, but the second I see that movie, it locks in for me. I don't feel that, I don't find anything like that in here, you know. I think that our generation was John Williams pilled, and that man could write a theme you remembered in 5 seconds, and I think he's kind of unique in that regard. So now we're like holding everybody to his standard, and certainly there are guys who can do that from time to time, but I don't know that like I, am sitting here being, I think that it is a kind of a failure on my part to like want everything to have that John Williams tone. And certainly like Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings theme, all of these, you do have themes like that, but it does feel like we're holding everyone to a standard set by the greatest ever,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of Williams and to some degree as well. I mean, Elfman's Batman score really became sort of the template for superhero movies, and I think that it's not a coincidence that Raimi goes to him for Spider-Man is like, give me Batman's, give me Spider-Man's theme. As we discussed in our episode, I don't think he succeeded, but it's not a terrible theme. It's just not a memorable theme, in my humble opinion. And I would argue that kind of, the closest thing I guess is what Hans Zimmer does with Batman to some degree becomes a little, but like, we just don't really have, you're not wrong, Emily. Like, John Williams is the man. He created pop song themes that are just like impossible to.
I think the style that he operated in, which is just the opera thing of giving everyone a leitmotif, has largely fallen out of favor. And I think, but with composers, I think with audiences, we're still like, well, everybody's got to have a theme. But I think composers are like, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's necessary. So
right. Jamie, what are your thoughts on Doug Ray Scott?
Oh, I enjoy him in this movie. I like his sinister, like he's trying something and I'm not mad about it, but I am grateful every day that this movie prevented him from being Wolverine. I think it's hard to even picture now, right? Like after all these decades. But I will say I really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine, but I was so pissed when Henry Cavill turned around and it was Henry Cavill because I thought for sure it was going to be Doug Ray Scott. And I was like, this is the moment where it's gonna happen, and I'm like, who cares about Henry Cavill? Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to curse on
No, yes, sure, please.
I can't even like. I'm Doug Ray Scott though. I'm like, what else? I can't even think of anything else he's in. I know I've seen him in other things, but
you
like,
really haven't.
He's fine.
I saw him in X-Men. I'm from another universe.
Oh, did you? How was he?
He's good. I prefer Hugh, but I think you can have a real Picard Kirk debate about Scott versus Jackman. The universe I'm from.
In the universe you're from. I'm looking. I do feel bad for him in the sense that this movie, for those who don't know, he got injured during the motorcycle fight scene, which we'll talk about at the end. And he tore his shoulder, and then this movie went over. So like there was just a whole kind of confluence of things that took him out of the Wolverine role that he had been cast in. Like he had received the role. The thing he doesn't have, and the reason why I don't think he would have been a good Wolverine, he's not charming and charismatic. He actually could have been good as why am I drawing a blank on Sabretooth, right? Like I actually think he could have been like, he has a wolfy kind of animalistic vibe to him, but like talk about falling into something so much better with Hugh Jackman. It's hard to even imagine.
One like obviously you haven't seen the other X-Men, so I
haven't seen it.
Speaking from a place of authority, but Earth 2, it's actually Earth 761.
Oh my,
sorry. Get it right. I do think like there is a thing about Doug Ray Scott where like I could have sworn he was in Oppenheimer. He's just like one of those guys that should have been in Oppenheimer.
Absolutely.
He was not, to be clear. But like I just feel like he's gonna pop up in some big ensemble thing from like a Nolan or a PTA or something. We're all gonna be like, oh, that guy, right? And he's gonna have like a totally thankless, totally fine role.
I don't know if you guys have, and I feel bad even saying this, but if you Wikipedia Doug Ray Scott, his photo is rough. Like time has not been kind to Doug Ray Scott, who's married to Claire Forlani, and I'm sure they're very happy together. But it's just he doesn't even look like the same guy.
You know what? I dig this. I think this is.
You?
I like the mustache.
I really also like the mustache.
I like the mustache. He's got character actor vibes in this picture.
Yeah, that's why he should have been in Oppenheimer.
I mean, for real though, I'm kind of amazed he wasn't. Now that you mention it, he's in Enigma, which was a movie that people kind of liked back in 2001, the Kate Winslet Codebreaker movie. And then it's just movies that don't exist. He's in My Week with Marilyn, I guess.
I was trying to remember what I saw him in recently, and it was Fear of the Walking Dead, which he was in the second season of in 2016. So that is showing you how recently but also famously he became the voice of Orby in adverts for the oil and gas company BP. We all remember his turn as Orby.
What is Orby? What are you even talking about? I don't even know what that is.
No, Wikipedia writes about it as though it's like, and then he assumed the mantle of Orby, like he became James Bond or something.
It is just interesting that this movie should have been the launching pad ultimately to two significant careers in Tanduy and in Doug Ray, and neither of them. Tanduy, I think, had more of a career. She's
an Emmy winner, yeah.
Oh, what'd she win an Emmy for?
Westworld.
She's great. She's the best part of Westworld. Truly.
100%.
But I mean, I do love her in that. I think Evan Rachel Wood is brilliant in that show, and
I do too. Actually, I take that back. She is great in that too.
She's
in the Charade remake that Jonathan Demme woefully makes with Mark Wahlberg and her, called The Truth About Charlie. Jamie's face is like, she was?
I didn't know that was a Charade remake.
It was a Charade remake. Yeah. I don't want Orby. Emily just sent us Orby on.
The only Demi movie I don't like, that remake.
Yeah, that movie's bad. I mean, I would argue he's actually good in it. It's Mark Wahlberg that destroys that movie. Like, just straight up destroys that movie.
I like Mark Wahlberg as an actor, but you have to use him perfectly. And
it is shockingly. I mean, he had a run there where he destroyed a lot of movies, but I do feel like that one in particular was just like, had it been almost any other actor, I think that movie might have actually worked. But it's interesting because she calls up Jonathan Demme while making Mission Impossible because she's cast in his movie, and that's what she's going to go make after it. And she's complaining about the script and just that she's like, Tom Cruise is great, he's doing the best he can, but like, we have bad words to say. Like, it's just like, you can't. How do you fix this? Chronicles of Riddick, Crash, Pursuit of Happiness, Norbit. I mean, she's in movies. Emily, we watched her recently in W as Condoleezza Rice.
She fucking nailed it. She nailed it.
She was
great.
She's a good actor. She's in Solo. Remember her in Solo, guys?
Oh, I do, because I'm still mad about that.
Yeah, they do her dirty in that movie.
They do her so dirty.
Yeah.
What happens to her in that movie?
She dies. Woody Harrelson died. I love Woody very much. I'm like number one cheer fan of her here, but he should have died, and she should have had his role for the remainder.
I agree, 100%. She's in Reminiscence.
That's what I interviewed her for.
Okay, which is the Lisa Joy movie. Which I didn't hate, but is forgettable.
I have never seen that because I want to like it, and I know once I see it, I'm gonna be like, that was fine. Like, I want to be like in the tank for that movie.
You'll never be in the. Although, Emily, I've given up trying to guess what you'll be in the tank for.
I just I know it's gonna be okay.
Sure.
She
was actually she's one of the few people that was able to create chemistry with Noah Wyle on ER. So she has a good run there. She's got like 14 episodes on that show, and it's a brutal and harrowing arc that she has with the Carter character. They have like a stillborn child, and it's a whole really like rough arc. She's really good in it. Yeah. I like Tanduy. She's great. Just wish that they gave her more to do in this movie.
She never got to play Orby, though.
She did not get to play Orby.
They never gave her that part.
I mean, the truth is that this movie, like, plot wise, there's not really much to talk about, as we've discussed. Like, there's a virus, and someone wants to get their hands, this evil IMF agent wants to get his hands on it. The movie opens with a pretty cool, plain, heisty kind of, made me think of Dark Knight Rises, sort of what could have been type thing. Tom Cruise, notoriously, the movie was supposed to go to the credits after the plane crashes and there's the fire, and Tom Cruise is like, this isn't exciting enough, we need to cut to me doing slow motion fucking rock climbing. Which sure. I don't know, this movie sort of wants to start with like big high stakes adrenaline, and I'm not sure that it totally gets it. But what do you guys think of the heist?
It's yeah, that's kind of like when the movie's really clicking for me. Like that part, and then how it, like that is all like really um I just
Working
like the
for you.
vibes.
Yeah.
I like the vibes of it. I can't
Sure.
explain to you anything that I like about this movie beyond the vibes, but I really like the vibes.
I get it. I do. I mean, I like, and Jamie, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, because this sort of speaks to this miniseries as a whole, because I think that whether Tom Cruise is cognizant of it or not, a series of films forces him out of a box that he sort of put himself into. And by that, I mean, like, I get that he enjoys playing the villain up top. You can see that he's having fun, having that kind of glimmer in his eye and being kind of evil up top, because spoiler, I mean, he's wearing a mask and he's really Doug Scott, like whatever. But I'm just sort of like, you can tell he's having fun there. And he gets to play a straight up villain in Collateral, which we're going to talk about eventually. But like, what are your thoughts on sort of this period of where this kind of shift that's happening with Tom Cruise, a divorce that ultimately kind of sends everything spiraling?
There it is.
Yep.
I would just like to go on record, first of all, saying that I'm a huge Tom Cruise fan, not just the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah. A couple years ago, I did Cruisapalooza, and I watched 20 of his movies in 2.5 days.
That's crazy.
I would like to finish his filmography. I have like a few left, but I just, there's something like he is, like he's a weird person, and that really works into his performances, I think, in a beautiful way. But I agree, like, like you said, Collateral was the perfect example, because when we all saw that movie in 2004, it was like, Tom, what are you okay? And you're right that he does I like you said glimmer, because I do feel that in the beginning. I love the opening scene of this movie, because at first when he's like, why are you calling me Dimitri, you know that his name isn't Dimitri, he's Ethan, right? So you're like, what's this about? And then it's, whoa, okay. I love a mask reveal. You will never ever get me sick of a mask reveal in the Mission Impossible.
And they're so well done too, by the way.
Always. I'm like, they got me again. Ooh. And
I just mean production wise.
Yeah.
Every time the mask comes off, I'm like, they do a fucking job, man.
Coming off the first movie, because the first movie is just like Tom Cruise in old man makeup, and then he like, right, like, which is cool. But then they start to progress into actors or playing characters and all that business, and they kind of do that in the end of the first one with John Voight. But still, it's I love it, and I really like this opening scene because it's scary, and it's also a scene that would not have happened 1 year later or a year and a half later.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's the end of a good old fashioned fun hijacking,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah. I mean, it takes what? I mean, Dark Knight Rises is 2012, so it's been a beat before you get another although I mean, I guess there are airplane movies, but yeah, I don't know.
There is that famous like hijacking movie that got delayed because of 9/11 and just sort of quietly buried. I think it's Big Trouble, maybe.
Yep, the Barry. Oh my God,
Barry Sonnenfeld.
Yeah. And it's like about a bomb at an airport. It's not even really about it doesn't matter. But yeah, I feel like, obviously, Tom Cruise has a very public divorce that happens right around the time of this movie, or the production of this movie. I guess even the release of this film. And I would argue this is the last time he is sort of Tom Cruise as America knows Tom Cruise, if that makes sense. Like, big action movie star. At this level, he does action movies, he does Night and Day, he tries to do things that are kind of like fun actiony movies, but like the bloom comes off the rose a bit around the jumping on Oprah's couch and the people just being like, what are we doing here? But then these Mission Impossible movies are still sort of his safe place, right? Like, he can still be Tom Cruise throwing himself out of planes and doing all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, Emily. I mean, we're going to talk. This miniseries is about this, but like it's just an interesting place to start. It feels like this is the only safety he has as a movie star is this franchise.
You don't think like you don't think that Minority Report is that? Because obviously it's less fun than this movie, but it's him with Spielberg. At the time, it was like a big deal. They were working together. It seems like they're going to build a working relationship.
I mean, they do War of the Worlds. Yeah.
And then like, you know, Tom Cruise. Yeah. I do think like this first half of the 2000s, yeah, he's not as locked in as he was in the 90s, but like it does feel like he's more or less clicking along. Like Vanilla Sky opens huge, you know?
It does. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I guess what I mean is we're starting to see the seams a little bit, if that makes sense.
Sure. It is the thing he's still doing where he's trying to seem younger than he is, and like aging is now starting to hit him like in a way that is going to be interesting to see him work with. One thing I love about Tom Cruise is his personal life, and I think that he's never made any bad choices. I want to be clear. As a movie star, I think he's fine. As a guy, I'm like unimpeachable.
Top notch. Yeah, I love it. Jamie, you were going to say something?
Oh, I would argue maybe that Mission Impossible this is the one decade it wasn't his safe place, because I know like personally like you guys are going to cover 3, but when I saw 3 in theaters, I think I was 16 and I was like, I hated it. I have grown more fond of 3, but especially the Julia arc. I think that Fallout has really helped save 3 a bit, but I didn't even see 4 and 5 in theaters because I'm like, I'm done. Wow. I give up on this. Wow. And then my roommate at the time, Becca, was like, Jamie, you got to watch 4 and 5. And again, like I said, now I have a Rogue Nation tattoo. I have made up for it. I've seen that movie 50 times, but like it was the 2000s that this franchise was in its weakest, and almost everyone I would know would say 2 and 3 are the bottom 2.
Yeah, I mean, I really like 3. I ride for 3. But
yeah, Phil is a 3 stan.
I am a 3 stan, but
you don't like Ghost Protocol as much as most people.
I actually like 3 more than Ghost Protocol.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Ghost Protocol to me is a really wet, like the set pieces are just gobsmacking, and like Brad Bird is definitely like gets the spectacle of it. But like Renner's kind of doing nothing in that movie. Paula Patton is just
no Tandy-Way. I'll tell you that.
She's no Tandy-Way. You know, obviously the Simon Pegg stuff is great, but like, yeah, I don't know. And the villain kind of sucks. Like 4 just to me just sort of just doesn't really work as well as it does for others. I agree with your hypothesis though, Jamie, that like 2 and 3 are definitely when the franchise feels its shakiest to some degree, even if like, I mean, 3 notoriously, like Sumner Redstone was like, get rid of this motherfucker, we don't want him on Paramount anymore. It's just like, what are we doing, guys?
if 3 had been the last Mission Impossible movie ever, that would not have surprised me, you know?
Right.
It underperforms relative to the other 2. Tom Cruise is like really on his last legs. Like famously, he comes into Ghost Protocol and like it seems like they're going to kill him off and replace him with Renner, and like then it's obvious that like he's still got it, so they you know keep bringing him back and Renner gets sort of phased out. But yeah, it is definitely. I do think that you're right, Jamie, that like this is a period in which he doesn't have a safe place, especially post Oprah, where he's like trying to go to a safe place and not finding it. Mission Impossible becomes that, but in the 2000s, it's like, is this guy a franchise guy in a way that like
totally, you know? Yeah, it's why I'm kind of the most excited to talk about this period in his filmography, because it's actually kind of the most fascinating period in his filmography, because like the 90s for him, he's just a fucking movie star. He's just crushing it, right? And I love those movies, but like this lack of a safe space, you know, when you look at Collateral, you look at Tropic Thunder, you look at like, you know, even Last Samurai to some extent, like these are kind of weird movies that kind of fall into a weird space for him. And even like, he doesn't, when is Rock of Ages? I know it's in the early 2010s, right?
2010, because I remember working at a movie theater when that came out, and I started working in a movie theater like 2009. So I think
it's post Ghost Protocol, right? Like it's 2012, I think. Am I making that up, Emily?
No,
or
that's about 2011.
Yeah, Ghost Protocol's 2011.
Rock of Ages, oh, you're right, it's 2012. So
it's like him thinking he's coming off of the success of Mission Impossible, and he's like, Hell yeah, I'm gonna do.
I was like, that's gotta be, it had to have been released in the between the years 2012 and 2014, because that was when Hollywood was like, Julianne Hough, a movie star?
Yeah.
Question mark? Question mark? Yeah.
I would like
Yeah.
to say I ride for Rock of Ages though, but I
That
love
movie's
musicals. I'm
crazy.
so easy to please. Like, yeah, whatever's
I
happening, give it to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't hate Rock of Ages, but I saw it with friends in the theater, and I've never been with a group of people angrier, like people
Mm.
that were just like ready to like throw tomatoes at the screen type anger. And I was just like, guys, this movie's bad, but like it's also kind of fun bad. I don't know.
It's like, it is very much an accurate translation of the Broadway musical at a time when people were not particularly interested in
Right.
like Broadway, what Broadway musicals had become.
Sure.
I think you see that start to shift a little bit in the mid 2010s, especially once Hamilton hits. But like people were just not aware that the Broadway musical was now like just like this weird abomination. Uh, I know that, like, and famously, as I've always said, Huff's got the stuff. So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, you wear
I
that shirt
can
all the time, Emily.
I am fascinated, not to do a Julianne Hough sidebar, but I'm fascinated by her as a person. Just everything about her is
She's
interesting
something.
to me. She
Yeah.
is, yeah, I don't even know what she's doing, who she is.
I don't
Like
know what motivates her to do anything, quite
every
frankly.
so often I will get a like, I'm not on many press release lists anymore. I'm apparently on the Julianne Hough one. So every so often I'll get one that's like, today she talked about her bisexuality and also how she loves like eating corn. And I'm like, what is happening
But
right
isn't
now?
she also like deeply religious?
I think that she's like deeply spiritual now.
Okay.
So
Okay. Fair
like
enough.
that
Fair enough.
kind
Fair
of thing, I
enough. Okay.
think, wasn't she raised Mormon? I know too much about Julianne
Hold on.
Hough.
Now I got to look up Julianne Hough because I'm just like, she definitely had a moment. Um, her father was twice chairman of the Utah Republican Party. So, yes, I'm assuming she's Mormon. She was born in Utah. Um, I don't know, man. She seems complicated. I'm sort of like she's no longer a practicing member of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Um,
Like, here's the
no,
thing. We talk about
she dated Ryan
this.
Seacrest.
Yeah, we talk about like the Tom Cruise leaving Scientology, like the Scientology thing. Very true. That's a wild cult and nobody should get involved in it. It is very hard to leave the LDS church, just
Oh,
in terms
interesting.
of like
Okay.
how it destroys your relationships with other people. And you aren't like cut off from them in the way you would be in an actual cult, but it
Hmm.
is like a thing that really does a number on people. So I applaud Julianne Hough, and you can look forward to Phil and my spin-off podcast, Huff Stuff.
Yeah. It's I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about, but
We're
two
just gonna
quick
talk
Put me
about
on
things.
for the
Julianne Hough.
Grease live show.
You can have that. That actually, by the
Yeah.
way, kind of great. Kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was
Grease is
so
my
good.
favorite movie of all time, so I did not
Great
hate the
movie.
live
Yeah.
show.
All those real life children in high school. Two quick things about Julianne Hough that I'm sure we all remember. The first was you might remember her Halloween costume as Uzo Aduba from
Yep.
Orange Is the New Black, which
Oh
did
Yep.
not go
no.
over well.
Didn't go over well.
Understandably, she later apologized. She said, "I realized my costume hurt and offended people. I truly apologize." So, cool. She was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
So she wanted to
Relatable.
destigmatize that. And to just to piggyback on your earlier comment, Emily, Huff describes herself as "quote unquote" not straight.
Yeah. hmm She has alluded to like having like assignations with women, but like she's only ever publicly been linked with men. Huff stuff's going to get into
Huff
all
stuff's
of
going to be
this.
great.
Yeah.
We're also going to do an entire episode on the that she co-owns a wine brand with Nina Dobrev called Fresh Vine Wine. So we're going to do a whole thing on
Oh,
that too.
they're like besties. Let's do this.
And we'll do this. Yeah, we can probably get them on, my guess.
I bet we can.
um,
Do you
all this
think
from
Nina?
Rock of Ages.
Do you think
Yeah,
Nina would co-host Huff Stuff with us?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This movie just it's there's a round. So I took notes as I was watching it, obviously, and I was like, this is the first action sequence in at least 40 minutes. When they're finally in the sort of the I don't know what you would call it, like the biosite headquarters where he's destroying the viruses and he's whatever, and he like obviously goes through the roof and he does his whole little, pretending to not hit the ground type thing or whatever. This sequence is when the movie gets some of its juice back, and I would argue my second favorite moment of this film is when he screams, "Just stay alive, I'm not gonna lose you," and then Tanaya, who's injected herself with this virus, then like throws himself out the giant hole that he's exploded or whatever. Like that sort of real movie star, romantic, kind of crazy action sweeping thing that you keep talking about, Emily, which I agree with. That moment to me is where it's like fully harnessed. And then like Naya wanders the streets of Sydney trying to sort of,
when you mentioned the heist and we were talking about the hijacking, I thought you were talking about this sequence in the labs when they're so that's why I was like, this is when it's really clicking for me. The hijacking is fine. It's fine. Yeah. But like, this is like when the movie, I'm like, is this movie secretly a masterpiece? And then the last hours like has good moments, but I do feel like that midpoint peak is just,
There's like a 10-minute scene where they talk about stock options where I'm just like, guys, get to the fucking action and let me out of this theater.
Listen,
what
as
are we
know,
doing?
as we know from Memoirs of an Invisible Man, stock options are like a really interesting thing to build a movie
Have
around.
you seen Memoirs of an Invisible Man, Jamie? Have you ever seen that John Carpenter movie? Oh yeah.
Did I put it on my watch list?
Yeah, don't delete it from your watch list if it's on your watch list.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. And then we basically now we're building towards this whole movie. Feels like it's been building towards a motorcycle, leather jacket, sunglasses, electric guitar chase fight scene that is fine. Like the chase is cool. There's some cool slow-mo. You've got Tom Cruise somehow like going on the front wheel of his motorbike and shooting at cars. Excuse me. But the moment when Ethan and Sean ride towards each other to like play chicken on the motorbikes, and then they jump into each other's arms, honestly feels like it was written and staged by an 8-year-old boy. Who's like, and then they just run at each other. They like, and then they like roll around. They fight. It truly feels like it was written by a child. Did you like that part, Emily?
I do like the bike stuff, and I do like the actual gunplay when they're fighting each other and shouting, you should have killed me or whatever. Yeah, it definitely feels like 2 7-year-olds playing at recess. But I love when he kicks the gun out of the sand and he's like, boom, I got my gun now. That's good shit when from 7-year-olds playing on the playground. That's when you're like, oh, I got your gun, and you're like, oh no, I kicked it out of the sand, and you're like, oh no, like that is good imaginative play like we'd see modeled in an episode of Bluey. So yeah.
But yeah. I mean, what do you think of the end of this movie, Jamie? What do you think about like the final action sequences?
I kind of like when they're beating the shit out of each other.
Okay.
Like in the sand. When I saw Black Panther: Wakanda Forever and they're kind of like fighting in the sand, the first thing I thought of was like, this is kind of giving MI2 vibes. Can't say if that's a positive or a negative, but it's where my brain's going. I just like, because like you said, there's not a lot of action in this movie. So when it happens, it's like, oh, okay. Let's get it on. All right. The whole like it's all so silly. You just can't like I just don't like. My boyfriend constantly calls this movie a slog because I'm making him watch Mission Impossible all the time. Like I'm always putting on a Mission Impossible movie and he's like, not this one, it's a slog. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I agree. It's just weird. It's just a weird movie with weird choices.
Yeah. I can't disagree with that. I don't think it's boring. I'm never bored, but sometimes I'm not as engaged as I'd like to be, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, it really, I would say maybe more than, I don't want to say any movie, but thus far we've only covered a handful of 2000s films, but this feels like a real time capsule movie. This is a real, like, you are in the 2000s. Buckle up. We haven't talked about Anthony Hopkins getting paid $1 billion for 2 scenes. He's good in this, but also like he could do this in his sleep.
He's got the best line in the movie. We love It's Not Mission Difficult. Like, I think that's like great. It's Anthony Hopkins saying it, so it's hilarious. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot Anthony Hopkins is in it. Like, it doesn't matter how much I watch it, he's a surprise every single time.
You know how like what's his name? God damn it, Macquarie's trying to like constantly like bring all of this into like a continuity that makes sense. He's got to have Hopkins in Dead Reckoning Part 2. He's just got to do it. He's got to be like, and here's Hopkins. Or like he should bring back Tendui. Like that would be wonderful. He should just do it.
He should, I mean, he could.
This is the one movie he kind of hasn't touched. because he figured out a way to make Julia work in the overall chronology. This is the one movie where it seems like he's like, that set. He has made it make sense in an overarching story of the series way. And like, this is the movie in which he's alone and like rebuilds the team. And I think it works in that sense, but I do want him to be like, bring back some of these elements, like in a way.
He brought back Henry Cersei. That's how you say his name, however you say his name, from the first one, in Dead Reckoning, which everyone was like, this is fucking rad.
And he's bringing back the dude that got sent to Alaska in the next one, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. So, like, I do wonder whether or not, like, somehow he pulls two into it. Like, bring back Tandui. Like, she'd be great.
Yeah, do it. And Hopkins. You know what? Bring back Anthony Hopkins and Tandui, and they're just hanging out in, like, a room. And they have, like a banner hanging up. This is like, congratulations, Ethan. And he walks in and they're like, we've been sitting here for 25 years waiting for you to show up. It's like the fucking Red Room in Twin Peaks. They're just like,
oh my God, that's yeah.
I feel like it could, honestly, I won't say who the person's name, but I met somebody at a party recently who is going to be in the next Mission Impossible.
Oh,
and
shit.
I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And they were literally like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know like when I'm going. I don't know what my part is. I just know that I'm in the movie. And I'm like, that's insane, but sounds like Christopher McQuarrie. Can't wait till you find out what you're doing.
Were you at a party for I Saw the TV Glow, and was it Fred Durst? Is the way he's pulling it all together?
How dare you?
Limp
Why do you
Bizkit?
keep trying to say his name? He's like Beetlejuice. Don't do it.
You're making me want to watch The Fanatic.
Fred Durst is tremendous in I Saw the TV Glow. I think he's got a whole second wave here.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Let's give him. Yeah. You cast him in your show, Emily. Your big show. I don't know.
Yeah.
The next show that you do is what I'm saying.
What if I just like walked into the Yellow Jackets room and was like, we're writing a part for Fred Durst? And everyone's
by
like,
the way, it could like, I wouldn't put it past Ashley to be like, you know what? Fred Durst is going to be on this show now.
Yeah.
It is. Anthony Hopkins is fun. It was supposed to be Ian McKellen. Who like at the last second turned it down in order to do the, thankfully, Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah.
The smart choice. I don't know that he's totally right for it. I mean, I know what they were kind of going for, but like, anyway, it doesn't matter. But I hope that McQuarrie finds a way to incorporate Mission Impossible 2 into whatever this next installment is. Just as a quick thing to sort of piggyback on what you were saying, Jamie, McQuarrie notoriously kind of sort of making this up as he goes along, which is kind of interesting because the movies don't feel that way, which is interesting, right? Like sometimes you can tell when a movie is just kind of whatever. But like my roommate worked at Bad Robot when they were doing Rogue Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her coming home and being like, this movie is going to be an unmitigated disaster. Like everything about this is just going to be a disaster. She's like, the script doesn't make any sense. We're doing massive reshoots. Like I just can't imagine. And then I remember seeing it opening weekend with her and a bunch of friends. And she was just like, I have no idea where that movie came from. Like just truly had no idea how it ever came to be, which is a kind of a superpower, which I hand it to him. Like he's made like 3 great movies. So, you know, he's made it work.
I think McQuarrie's whole method, which, you know, when I've had this happen with novels where I'm like, I have stuff in here that works, but the whole is like a mess. But me reworking a novel, there's like a lot less on the line than you being like, this blockbuster doesn't work. I need another $100 million and we're going to like just reshoot the shit out of it. But it's worked for him several times now. At some point, it's not going to work. And we're all going to be like, what was that?
Yeah, the only way it works is because he's under the umbrella of these franchises that protects him to be able to kind of, you know, ultimately do whatever he wants, right? Like when you've got Tom Cruise being like, McQuarrie was involved in Maverick as well, Top Gun Maverick. Like McQuarrie's his guy, and obviously he's sort of really ushered this next phase of Tom Cruise's career, whatever that very well looks like. Who knows? So at the end of our episodes, Jamie, we do a rating of 0 to 99. 0 being the lowest, 99 obviously being the highest, and we rate it when we first saw it and what we think of it now. So what would you you can take a second to mull that over while
It's a
Emily and
3.5 on Letterboxd. What's the math there?
It's just so like we generally like think of 50 as the recommend line. So if you're over 50, you're recommending it, and increasingly with increasing fervor the further up you go. And if you're under 50, you're not recommending it.
Right.
I'll just go first.
Go.
Because I know how this works.
Yes.
I've been here before. I want to say in 2000, I probably would have given it a 50. I probably would have been right on the line.
Interesting. Okay.
Since then, I've gone down. I've gone back up. Now I think I'm at like a 67. It's a movie that I really appreciate and love the look of, and love a lot of the like tone. The story kind of doesn't work. There's stuff in it that's just like isn't quite right. But when it kicks into gear for me, it just really kicks into gear. And just to spoil where we're going with this, I prefer it to 3. I think 3 is forgettable in a way that I don't I like what it does for the franchise. I like it as a movie. I think it's mid. So yeah.
So when I saw this in 2000, I'd say I was, as I said, underwhelmed. I probably would have given it like a 60. I didn't really love it. I'm up a little bit. I'm gonna go up to like a 64. I'm sort of like it's fine. I don't, when I get in a Mission Impossible mood, it's certainly not going to be the first one I go to. But if I'm similar to Jamie, watching the franchise as a whole, or doing a rewatch or whatever, yeah, I'll certainly get back on the motorbike and drive through fire just cause. But yeah. What about you, Jamie? Where are you?
Well, I do remember 10-year-old me not being a fan. So I would say at 10 years old, I probably would have been like a 49.
Okay.
Right under the line. And then so you were a 63 and 67.
Yeah.
I think based on how we've all been speaking about it, I think I got to go right in the center at like 65 and a half. Like I think I got to like fall right in between.
That feels right.
Yeah.
You know what? You don't have to listen to us either. You can.
It just feels right based on how we've all been talking about it. I'm comfortable with that. But on Letterboxd to 3.5. I just want to put that out.
Just want to put that out there. That
that's really, like
3.5.
On Letterboxd that would be a 70, and you're really close. You're really close to that. So I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Next week on this podcast, we'll be talking about Vanilla Sky with Justin and Laura Koo from Cows in the Field, their podcast. Jamie, you got brief thoughts on Vanilla Sky? You fan, pro?
I'll tell you, Vanilla Sky, watching that movie was how I learned what sex was. I realized it. I remember it vividly. I was watching it and I was like, that's what sex is. So that's what I think of when I think of Vanilla Sky. It taught me what sex was.
If I ever meet Cameron Crowe someday, I'm going to tell him that you learned what sex is from Vanilla Sky, which I don't know if that's a good thing.
I learned what sex was from We Bought a Zoo, which was very
interesting.
Strange.
That's interesting.
Like, yeah. I'd been married for a long time at that point. It was, but it was.
You knew that sex was buying a zoo.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what's not working for me is I need to buy a zoo.
I need to buy a zoo. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to talk Vanilla Sky. I'm excited to do it. It is a movie that I ride for maybe more than I should. It's a mess, but I kind of love it. It's, you alluded to this, Emily, earlier. The Tom Cruise is getting old, and you can sense that like he wants to be cool in this movie, and you're like, I don't know if that bucket hat's working, Tom.
Ugh, bucket hats. Gotta bring them back. That's
they are back.
They are back.
That's why we gotta that's why we gotta get Fred Durst back. We gotta get him in the bucket hat. He's just got a he's here, Phil, we could sell this today. Fred Durst, he's a PI who's he doesn't say very much. He wears a bucket hat and he only like speaks when he sees a clue, and he says there's a clue. It's like Blue's Clues, but with Fred Durst.
Don't like it. Don't want
a bucket hat. Well, we're gonna sell it. We just sold
it. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that, Jamie, to your comment of that this movie taught you what sex was, it definitely, it's got some lines that you'll remember and will leave and certainly make you go like, not sure I ever needed Cameron Crowe or Cameron Diaz to execute said dialogue, but that's what we're going to talk about next week, and it's going to be great. Emily, when was the last time you saw Vanilla Sky? Has it been
in theaters? And when I left the theater, I was like, that's my number 2 movie of this year. And then over time, I like it sort of fell in my esteem, like immediately within several days of seeing it.
Yes.
but I did really love it at the time.
Uh-huh.
I remember certain elements of it quite vividly. I saw some of the sex scenes in that movie and was like, I don't know what that is because they weren't taking place at a zoo. But like I remember really loving it. I'm guessing I won't love it as much, but I do like, I mean, it's all of it's my shit. It's so weird and like it's strange. Yeah.
I'm super excited to do this episode because I think first of all, I'm very curious to hear what you think of this movie now, Emily, through a 2024 lens, and your various film criticism since. It's going to be a wild ride.
It's I genuinely like, I'm thinking about this project I'm working on, this novel I'm working on, and being like, what is in the DNA of this? I think a little bit of Vanilla Sky might be.
Great.
And like, I will not be surprised to find out. Yeah.
Uh,
Oscars all around.
Oscars for everybody. Jamie, is there anything that you would like to plug or talk about?
I would love to plug some things.
Please.
Sadly, due to corporate nonsense, I have lost my Marvel podcast. But
I'm sorry.
because Agatha All Along is the thing that I'm like most excited about in the world this year, I'm going to be on Slayer Fest 98 talking about episode 3 of Agatha, and I'm going to be on Agents of Fandom talking about episode 4 of Agatha. I will not. They can't silence me.
They can't stop you.
I'll talk about my Sapphic Witches all day. And then I also have a podcast called Love in the Time of Hydra, which is an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. 10th anniversary podcast. We just kicked off with season 2, episode 1 this week. And then on October 6th, we have an LA Comic-Con panel. So October 6th at 1 o'clock, you can come watch me live talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
This is all amazing. Agatha All Along, which I've watched the first 2 episodes of, is a blast. Had a lot of fun with it. Have you watched it yet, Emily?
No, I haven't. I don't watch. I'm very into Matlock right now. So.
Oh, okay.
That is unironic. That is a good show.
I know.
Everybody should watch Matlock.
Have you watched the new one? Have you watched the Kathy Bates one yet?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Matlock 2024. Parenthesis 2024.
Okay.
It rocks.
I bet. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Jamie, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk Mission Impossible 2 with us. This was a blast.
Jamie, can I ask you one more question?
Please.
So when we do Huff stuff, should we how do we cover Dancing with the Stars? Because it's such a big part of her arc. Do we do a season per episode? Do we do episodic recaps?
I think you got to just start from the beginning and do every single episode she's in and make this podcast go on until the end of time. I think that's
Why are you doing this to me, Jamie? Do you realize what you've just subjected me to? I want to go on record and say that I am not signing on for Huff stuff.
Well, that's going to be your loss because I just got a letter from
from Julia
Hollywood, and Hollywood says they're optioning Huff stuff to a 7-picture deal.
That sounds great. I'll cash the checks, but I'm not doing that podcast. Jamie, thank you again. We're gonna let you go, but this was the best, and we hope that you'll come back and talk about something else with us.
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.